The Foreign Affairs Minister reiterated today that U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum are damaging economically and politically, and that it's not just Canada that feels that way. Here's Chrystia Freeland earlier this afternoon on her way into question period.
We are hearing from American leaders in the Senate, from American leaders in Congress, from American trade unions, that they agree with us that the 232 tariffs should be lifted. We are hearing very specifically from all of those American leaders and organizations that they believe they cannot support the ratification of the new NAFTA without those tariffs being lifted. So that is positive news when it comes to Canada.
For more on what Freeland said, I spoke earlier with the CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. I asked her what stood out for her during that news conference and if there's a risk the new NAFTA won't be ratified.
So there's been a lot going on in Ottawa, and haven't been talking about this maybe as much as we could have. But what she says is serious. There are people both in Washington and definitely in Ottawa who are not that interested in proceeding with ratification so long as steel and aluminum tariffs remain in place. And further, what was so interesting about what Freeland said today in this scrum with reporters was that she elaborated on what Canada's ambassador in Washington, David McNaughton, has been saying kind of for the last little while, which is that Canada is having another look at its list of retaliatory tariffs. So these were the billions of dollars in tariffs, dollar for dollar, value-wise, matching what the Americans were doing to Canadian products that Canada put in place last summer when its steel and aluminum started being hit, to send a message to Washington that this wasn't okay, that they felt it broke the rules, and it wanted to increase some political pressure on the Americans to do something about it, to lift these tariffs. Canada saying now it has gone over its math and it believes that it isn't actually matching necessarily dollar for dollar the full impact that it could be, looking again at its list of what products, what U.S. imports are targeted in this, whether it needs to change the mix up a bit, perhaps add some more products from places where they could exert a little bit more political pressure. But that'll be a very interesting thing to watch because, of course, who pays these tariffs? Well, it's consumers, it's end users, manufacturers, people who need those products who end up actually paying the brunt when tariff wars like this escalate. But here's a little bit more of what Freeland had to say on this issue of retaliatory tariffs.
Canada has, from the outset, considered these tariffs to be illegal and unjust. Frankly, they are absurd. That is why we put in place our retaliation, the strongest retaliatory trade action Canada has ever taken. That is why we are challenging these tariffs at the WTO and at NAFTA.
And to get back to NAFTA ratification for a minute, Andrew, you know, she again used a phrase we first heard from her last week, I believe. She said it would be a Pandora's box to open up this agreement again. But there are some legislators in Washington who very much do want to do that. They want to go back over some of the provisions in the deal that was signed at the end of November, perhaps changing some of the rules around patents for biologic drugs and some other things, labor and environment provisions that they're not entirely happy with. Canada saying, no, deal's a deal. You have the text. It's your job to ratify it. This is your process and your issue now. And Freeland today, most interesting to me, was saying, look, there isn't the same urgency to get NAFTA 2.0 ratified as there was perhaps to get Canada's deal with the European Union or the CPTPP with Pacific Rim trading partners in place, because Canada already enjoys market access to the U.S. and Mexico. It already has favorable tariff treatment with this market. And indeed, you know, a lot of people have been saying, look, this is just a tweak. The measures that this new deal actually contains are fairly minor. You know, there is no panic. In fact, maybe the old NAFTA is more favorable for a lot of Canadian industries than the new one. So why would Canada sweat it at this point? So a very interesting dynamic shaping up while Washington stubbornly clings to its steel and aluminum tariffs and doesn't seem to be budging.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.